Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 8th of February 2023, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G4WNC. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, we get an illustrated introduction to Node Red with Mike G4WNC. Is this a cuddly little mouse or... And we find out what on earth this is, or these are. And if you haven't already done so, you can pop an answer onto Facebook or BATC, and we'll read those out with the competition in about 10 minutes' time. But first, I'm afraid I start with the sad news that a local amateur, Tony Barron 2E0TAZ, has sadly passed away. As you can see, Tony was well known as a professional wrestler, although he was always a gentle giant to us. To be honest, it's quite some time since we saw Tony at the club, but our respects and thoughts and love with his wife, Karen M3 IPD, and all of his family and friends. Now, we don't have details of Tony's funeral yet, but if you would like details of that, when I get them, please drop me an email and I'll let you know as soon as I hear them. Tony Barron, 2E0TAZ, sadly now silent key. And we also have news that Norfolk County Raynet has been put on standby for the unexploded ordnance exposed in Southtown, Great Yarmouth yesterday. There is an exclusion zone of 200 metres around the junction of Boundary Road and Southtown Road in Great Yarmouth, and an advisory exclusion zone of 400 metres, which may last a further 24 hours while bomb disposal teams make the bombs safe. So, if you are a member of Norfolk County Raynet, please charge up your portable radios and watch for emails from Controller Mike G8EEY regularly for further updates. Now Malcolm G3PDH updates us with club contact news and the AFS affiliated societies, contest news and the AFS 80 metre and 40 metre contests. The contest took place in January. We had a good result for NARC in the local club sections. The declared positions for the AFS contest are based on the first four highest scores, with subsequent teams in groups of four thereafter. So for CW, we came 5th place. For Data, we came 2nd place. For SSB, we came 3rd place. Of particular note was the number of participants from NARC, which enabled us to register 4 teams in each contest, substantially more than most other clubs. A great effort by all those who participated. Now, this last Monday evening saw the start of the annual 80 metre club championships with SSB. Conditions were unusually good for February into G working, with some 13 logs registered for NARC in the local club section, and it appears that we made a good start based upon the unaudited raw scores submitted. The next contest in this series is Data next Wednesday the 15th of February, followed by CW on Thursday the 23rd. Now, a note from Ralph 2M0RHT, who says, thank you very much to Roger G3LDI for the excellent article regarding the Beauvais Island, which, until Roger's article, I was not aware of the proposed expedition. My knowledge and understanding of Beauvais is Beauvais Lauderbay, a rather excellent producer of wine, it would be, wouldn't it, for him, in a part of the world I know very well, the Loire Valley. And in particular, I need your help with the pronunciations, I think, here. And in particular, the area of the Semur-Loire, where I often loiter in the summer months. The Chenin Blanc, is that right? Grapes grown there produce a most acceptable tingle on the palate when processed through the capable hands of the Beauvais family. It's interesting to learn the origin of the Beauvais Island, which Norway calmed but we must note that it was a Frenchman from the Beauvais family who first saw and named the island, hence its name. I now feel the need to visit the wine cellar. Roger gives us excellent advice regarding how to operate when the world and his uncle and auntie are trying to make contact with the Beauvais Island expedition. 3 of my best and most distant contacts were after listening, and then making the right move at the right time on 50 watts. Excellent advice, Roger. Thank you for the reminder. And thanks for the wine lesson, I think, don't you?
You feel cultured now.
God, I feel colded now. If I have a voice in an hour's time, it'll be remarkable. Anyway. And finally, some pictures from Bob G4WNC. And firstly, we start with this. We think this fella slept in here all night. He says, because it was bitter cold and he or she seemed nice and warm. Yeah, it does look like that. It's an intriguing sort of bird box. Isn't it? Is that like a shelter just to keep the food dry, do you think, normally? It's not really meant for a bird to stay in, is it?
Well, no, it's got suckers, so it's a window box.
Oh, it's on... I hadn't noticed that. I was thinking it was on something else. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's good. I give new ideas. All right, and then we had this, and he said, and then we had a rat decide to feed. Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
That tail's unmistakable. Doesn't look like a bird to me.
He's hungry, isn't he? He's
and
like
finally,
poking his head round there.
Oh, right, yes.
You can't see me.
Yes. I think it's unmistakable, though.
Bob says it's a viewing box for the kids. the bird box.
Oh, bird box. Oh, I love that, Bob. Yeah, I've never seen one of those before. Makes me think for some reason this is Faulty Towers. They're going to remake that, did you know?
Faulty Towers?
Yeah, apparently.
Right.
Did you know the rat episode? No, anyway. Okay, and then this finally, I don't know what this picture is. Oh, it's a train. And this is Guess Who on a loco. Can't think of it. He's not driving there. He's on the brake van,
I hope he's not driving it.
He's on the brake van, I think. Anyway, I think that's a Peckett class, isn't it? Is that a Peckett?
If you say so, yeah.
Anyway, all right. Thank you very much, Bob, for those pictures to end our roundup of the club news this week. Tammy, over to you for little people and me to get a drink of black coffee.
Here's little people this week. Have you ever thought, when you see a circuit board, is it always what it seems? Or do you think it's people planting stuff?
Oh, yeah, that is good,
Is it like rice fields or something, do you think?
Yes, could be.
Instead of solder. There you go.
Or it could be them with a very big soldering iron just soldering all the joints up.
Well, it could be.
That is good, isn't it? That's some kind of motherboard, I should think, with a motherboard connect. I'm thinking it... you always tell me I'm overthinking things when I see something like this, because it's my world. I see that and I just think of the edge connectors that are probably underneath the circuit board there and the surface mount resistors.
Right, it's time to take it off the screen.
Sorry. Okay, anyway, that is wonderful. Thank you very much, Tammy, for choosing that. It's miniature-calendar.com. They put a different picture on every single day. It's this wonderful Japanese website, as we've told you before. And you can have a look at that or let Tammy choose one for us every time we do an Arc Live. Thank you, Tammy. So, what have you been doing then? We've got a little bit of news today, but remember it's going to be again 2 weeks before we meet again on Arc Live, but we'd love to share your news, views, pictures, anything at all that you'd like to share with other club members. As usual...
It's Koblenz this Saturday.
Yes, it's coming up. I have not forgotten. It's on it's on the script.
You didn't tell me
page 2
that.
of the script. I'll mention it in a moment. Don't worry. As always, though, please do let us know. Keep in touch with those. And Tammy, if you read the script, there's a caption coming up now, which is radio@dcpmicro.com for you to send us any details of anything that's happening in your world which you'd like to share with other club members. We'd love to hear it. Thank you. So now it is on to the competition. Don't worry, it will be coming about what's happening on the club this week. And we sent you this picture. We put this on our Facebook group, our page rather, and we put this on the website and the newsletters, and we showed you last time what on earth is this or what on earth are these. Now, when I was a bit worried when I said this, I might not say too much now, I suppose, but I thought it was obvious. So it must mean I just knew, but was it obvious? So have we got anybody who's
We have.
answered?
Tony M0TDK thinks it could be Captain Hook's accessories.
Okay, right.
Richard M6.
Oh no, we can't read that. Don't read that. Do you want to read that?
He says,
read it.
He says, goodness knows, they're not from 50 Shades, are they?
I'm glad you read that, Tammy, because that's a book that ladies read, not men, apparently. Have you had anything on Facebook?
Colin, M0GMK, says, what on earth? He thinks they might be attachments for prosthetic arms.
Okay. Okay, well, Bob, G6PWS, has said on Facebook he thinks it's a false hand, I think.
Yep, that's
and that's
all on
it.
there, I think.
Okay, so let's go through the official answers, as it were, that were emailed to us. So firstly, Tom G8XQD says, I recognise these as vintage attachments for a prosthetic arm. Quick look up revealed these are or identical to the tools used by John Williams, who was wounded in the First World War.
Ralph 2M0RHT says, this is obvious. These are working parts of the equipment used by CW tutors. These are parts fitted to the fingers of their students to ensure students do not stop practicing.
That's true. They must have. Roger's got something to say about that. Proust G4KZT says, a work colleague many years ago lost a hand in an accident and had various attachments he could plug into the socket at the end of his arm. Is that what this week's What on Earth mystery objects are?
Neil G4JUV, guess one is Captain Hook's hand, certainly close. After a bit of research, I found this. Attachments for a prosthetic arm worn by John Williams of, what was that word? Penricod.
Yeah.
Who was wounded in one arm during the First World War. Writing this in Cyprus, where NARC Live works perfectly, thanks.
Mm. And so the answer is, they are prosthetic arm attachments and pictures that were sent in by Ted G4OZG. However, they are not they weren't worn by John Williams because Ted tells us that they belong to his father, who lost his right hand in a mill accident during the 1930s, long before modern prosthetic hands. These hooks fitted into a socket that was part of a sleeve made of metal and leather with some padding on the inside. He slid this assembly onto his forearm and secured it with a harness to attach it firmly. The hook was used for garden tools, spades, forks, shovels, etc., even an enormous scythe for cutting hay and grass. All his forks and spades had to have a T-handle with a hole drilled through it to attach the brass ring that kept the hook from coming off the handle, and you can just see that there on the right, I think. The other picture shows, my garden fork, as in Ted's garden fork, although there's no hole in my fork to put the handle through. The more open hook was used for all general work, riding a bicycle, or in the early days, working with horses and carts. He even used a huge circular saw table driven by a belt from a tractor to cut firewood, which he delivered with the horse and cart. Long before my time, of course. And of course, the story goes on and on. This is what Ted says. And that his father died in 1985, aged 93. So that does enable us to say it's the sort of late 1800s that was used. But isn't that wonderful?
No, it was 1930s. He had his accident.
Is it? Okay. Oh, yes. But I mean, I'm saying when he was born.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
Late 1800s. But that's fantastic. Well, so thank you for that. And thank you for the pictures and also the story go behind them. And you fox some people and not others. And they aren't Morse sort of practice punishments or whatever. Anyway, let's have a look at what they've got for you this week and this competition. And we ask, what on earth is this? You know what that is?
Yep.
Okay, that's all we can say. No clues, I've been told. All right, so if you know what that is, please send your answers. I'm dying to do a gag there, but I'll do it next week.
Yeah.
Do send your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com. radio@dcpmicro.com. We need to get them by Wednesday week by 3 o'clock in the afternoon when we put the scripts and stuff together. Thank you very much. So if you know now, send it now. Don't put it on Facebook though, please, or that, because it spoils it for other people who want to enter. Now before we meet our guest this evening, time to have a look at this coming week at Norfolk Amateur Radio Club. And firstly, Saturday, it is time for our Koblensked on 7.123 megahertz at 10 o'clock local time. And a note from Malcolm, actually, just to explain to me, we mention this every month when we do it, but the bit of the history behind it. Well, Koblenz is twinned with Norwich, and is allied to the formal Norwich Koblenz Friendship Association. And obviously the club, the radio club in Koblenz, is twinned with ours. Malcolm G3PDH is the net controller for this. Excuse me, I was hoping not to cough, sorry. And we use our G8QR call sign, and everyone is welcome. There's also a listening watch on 145-250 megahertz if you want to let the net controller know you are there. So that's this Saturday at 10 o'clock local time on 7.123 megahertz. Do join in. It's we welcome everybody to have a chat. And the conditions have been good the last few nets as well. On Sunday, it's at 7 o'clock. It's the GB2RS News on repeater GB3MB. On Monday night, the Monday Night Net at 7:30 on GB3MB as well. And at 8:30, the 80-metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, the 15th of February, as I said, it's a real-life meeting, face-to-face meeting at CNS School between 7 and 9:30 p.m. It's a social gathering, plus after notices at 7:30, it's the first session in our Raspberry Pi Jam workshops. And now Raspberry Pi Jams is what they're officially called. And it's being run for us by Jeff, G7PLF. Lovely that he's offered to do this. We've already got, I think, 11 people on the list, so we're pretty full now. But if you're itching to get on with that, please drop me a note with your name and we will put you on there. Please bring any Raspberry Pi or any similar projects you've made as well. Just for this first introductory session, really Jeff's going to use it to talk to everybody to find out what experience everybody has, and then he'll be able to set the level for that as well. And I know that our guest this evening, actually, when we meet in a moment, is very keen on the Raspberry Pi, so I'm sure he'll be pleased as well that we're going to be running this sort of very informal workshop-y course over the next few months. And then just to also let you know, as a bit of advance notice, that the next meeting that we have after the 15th of February, so in 2 weeks after that, on March the 1st, we have a presentation by the RSGB about Brickworks, which is all about taking your foundation license further. So if you have a foundation, you want to go on to your intermediate and everything, and further than that. But it appeals to everybody, really. So they're coming to see us at CNS on the 1st of March, just a bit of notice, really. And we've invited other local clubs as well to that. And that's almost it for our news. Just to remind you again, please send your stories and all your details to us. And if you'd like us to send this, our NARC card, to anybody who you feel will be cheered by this card, we'll send them to absolutely anybody. They don't need to be a member. They don't need to be even a radio amateur. We'll just drop me a note with their name and address to this address, the radio address on your screen, and we will send them this card and add your name to ours as well and send it out. Thank you. I know, so please don't cough. Anyway, now it's great to get to our main event. And tonight, a guest who's been with us many times before over the last few years. It's Mike Richards G4WNC down there in Somerset, I think, Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Hampshire, actually.
Hampshire, I'm sorry. I knew it was somewhere down that way. Anyway, lovely to see you again.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. You're going to talk to us tonight, I think, about Node Red, which I'm going to be honest with you. When I saw that on the running, or on our program, and I thought, I don't know what that is, and I had to look it up, Google it, and find out. And I suspect that's going to be the same for many others. So That's what you're here to tell us about tonight. And just to let everybody at home know, if you've got any questions or any comments about this at any time, you can pop them onto Facebook or BATC, and of course we'll read those to Mike at the end. But anyway, said love to see you again, Mike, and we look forward to talk, and we'll have a chat afterwards. Over to you.
Very good, thank you. I will just offer one thing actually on that news item about your Raspberry Pi Jam.
Oh yes.
If they need any help, if I can offer any help, very happy to join in. I know I'm remote, I can't actually get there, but I've also got some pre-formatted cards that I do with data mode software and stuff like that. I can arrange some discounts or give you some help with stuff on that. So if you let whoever's running it know, I'll be very happy to join in and help out if I can.
Well, thank you, Mike. I think, in fact, when we first met you a few years ago, I think it was giving a talk about something on Raspberry Pis. I mean, this is probably starting pandemic, sort of 2020 time, something like that. And yes, good point. I remember you doing these cards now, probably updated since the one I got from you before. Maybe I'll get one of those and from you, and if we get it in time for next week, and we can talk about it as well. I think the idea of it, and just for anybody at home as well who hasn't, I have mentioned this before here and on newsletters as well, but the idea is for those many Raspberry Pis that we think are languishing in drawers, never really been put into good use or action, or maybe just one project. And Jeff, who ran a similar, very informal course when he worked for Anglia Television, just down the road. He just thought that this might interest people in our club, and it certainly has. But thank you very much for that offer, Mike, and I'll certainly let Jeff know, and hopefully other people. We might be able to use some of your advice and some of your ideas for the projects as well. Okay,
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'll be very happy to help. In fact, Node-RED runs very nicely on the Raspberry Pi. So something else you can add.
Excellent. All right.
Anyway, I'll get on with my job now. So
thank you.
So as David said, I'm sure there's quite a few of you who've not heard of Node-RED and wonder what on earth it's going to be about. And the reason I'm doing this tutorial is meant to be a basic tutorial. And Node-RED is basically a programming language, but a very simple and pictorial programming language, which is very useful for amateur radio use, and it enables you to write programs with almost zero code. And I've been waiting for something like this to appear for a long time. There's been a program called Flowcode around, which is vaguely similar, but this takes it to a different level. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to start my slideshow proper and run you through this. So this is the plan that I'm going to cover. So I'm going to start off telling you a little bit about the origins and the development of Node-RED, because it helps to understand where it came from to realize what it's like now. And I'll obviously discuss what Node-RED actually is. I'll tell you how to install it. I'll tell you a bit about programming with Node-RED, and then we're going to get really dangerous, and I'm going to build a project from scratch on the screen while you're watching. So fingers crossed for that. So where did it come from? Well, it originated in IBM's Emerging Technology Group, which is based at Hursley near Winchester. And Nick O'Leary and Dave Conway-Jones were the guys who initially developed it. And Nick O'Leary is still very much with the project and has stayed with it right the way through. And their role, they've got a really interesting role, actually, a lovely job, where they develop software for prototypes. So if IBM want to create a computer system to do a particular function, they will prototype it for them. Or if a customer comes along to IBM wanting, say, a computer control system for their factory, then these are the guys that will write prototype software so you can demonstrate what it's likely to be, and then you can tweak the design, etc., and then you come up with a final design. So it's an interesting world that they work in. And one of the things that they do an awful lot of is handling data from an assorted devices and sensors. So you can imagine that, you know, if you're looking at some control software to operate a machine in a factory, you've got all manner of different control systems feeding data back to a central point that you have to process. So that's the sort of problem that they're faced with on a regular basis. And at the time, they were experimenting with JavaScript, Node.js, and a messaging system called JSON. And they were also using this code to see how they could visually connect blocks of code together to make it quicker and easier to produce code. And they were using this messaging system called JSON to carry the messages about. Now, in all this work sort of came together, and they started producing code blocks to convert all the messages to JSON. So you've got a number of things going on at the same time of JavaScript connecting things together in code blocks in the browser and this messaging system to move stuff around. And the net result, well, if you imagine this is the sort of challenge they'd be faced with. So if this was a home automation system that they were having to design, you'd have an assortment of sensors. You'd have temperature sensors, humidity sensors, heating controls, hot water temperature, all sorts of things. And the chances are they'd all be connected in different ways. And the format of the signals that they send would all be different. So every time you'd have to rewrite all this stuff to process all this information. So what they decided would be a much better way of handling this problem is to do this. So for each device, they'd write some reusable code which would convert whatever the messages were coming in into a standard messaging format, this JSON message. And they would write this code for all the different devices they encountered. And as they completed or tackled more projects, you would have an ever-increasing library of little conversion blocks written in code that you could use. And of course, what that means is in the future, when you get a different project, you can just pick the appropriate code block and use it to convert everything into this familiar messaging system called JSON. And that's effectively what Node-RED is. So what is it? So it's a visual programming language where you drag and drop functional blocks to build a flow diagram. Here's an example. So one of the things we're going to do tonight is to build a rig control program so you can remotely control your radio. So the first thing you'll probably need is a node that allows you to enter the frequency that you want to tune to. And then you'll need a node or a block that is able to change the frequency of your rig. And then you'd wire those two together. So you enter the frequency and send it to the block that can change the frequency. But then you'd want another node that can display the frequency so you know that the frequency's changed on the rig. So you'd have those three nodes connected together, and that's a Node-RED program. And a Node-RED program is called a flow, literally because it is like a flow chart. And writing a program can be as simple as that. So what happens inside Node-RED? Well, the role of all the various nodes or code blocks is to pass and process messages from one node to another and to take action on them. So when the node that is able to change the frequency of the rig receives a number saying what the new frequency is, it takes action and it changes the frequency. And this enables you to create applications with the bare minimum of coding. Sometimes you don't need to add any code. Sometimes there's just a little bit of coding to do. So let's look at this JSON message format. And it is a simple plain text messaging system. So if you're going to imagine, what you need to do is to send a message from a temperature sensor or whatever to a device, and it needs to be sent in a formatted way that other devices can read it. So what I've shown here is an example of a JSON message. Now in this case, what it's sending is my name, my call sign, my rig, and my antenna. And all JSON messages begin with these curly brackets and end with curly brackets. And then in this case, we've got a field where the left at the top there is the name, and the one to the right after the colon is the data for that. Then there's a comma, which means there's more data to come. And then you have the name of the next field and the data that goes into it. A comma, the name of the next field and the data that goes into it, and so forth. And this can go on as long as you like. And after the last one, there's curly brackets which close it. So you can see this is a very simple way to send messages across a computer network. There's a few big advantages with this over many other systems. The first one, which is important, is that it's human readable. So you could open this message file and you can read what it's trying to do. The second thing is that it's very easy for a computer to understand this because it's got a strict syntax in that it sees the curly braces and it knows that's the start of the message. And it can see the colon and these pairs and the commas to know how to break up the parts of this message and so make use of it. So it's a really simple messaging system, and it's used at the heart. Well, it's used throughout the web nowadays. It's taken over from XML and other systems because it is so lightweight and efficient way to send messages. So it's universally used now. So in Node-RED, the default name for a JSON message is just MSG. And if you've only got one item inside a message, it's called its payload. And so you refer to it as message.payload. It's not particularly important at the moment, but that's just a bit of background for you to show how it is referred to. So Node-RED has been about a long time now. I think it was 2015 it started. So it's a mature open source project. IBM have open sourced it. Version 3 is the latest version, and it now includes a dashboard. And the dashboard node is so important because it allows us to make a browser-based graphic user interface, which is the visual thing we're used to using when we operate a program. So that means you can build an entire project in Node-RED and have it working. And I'll show you how you can do that in just a moment. So here's an example of a Node-RED amateur radio project. So this is pretty impressive. So when you look at this screen, the bottom section of this screen is the Flex Radio Spectrum display. So that's not Node-RED. But all the rest of this screen has been built in Node-RED. So in here, he's got control of his power amp on the left here. The next section, the tuner, gives him access to his antenna tuner. Then you've got details of the Flex Radio. There's antenna switching in the middle. And then there's this wonderful map that you can click and drag and choose where your antenna's pointing. And over on the right-hand side is some more controls. So you can see that's a very useful way of pulling all the essential controls for the shack together in one panel. And this is done entirely in Node-RED. So it's really, I mean, this is quite an impressive application of Node-RED. So how do we get it? Well, it's completely free, and it's available for Windows, Linux, and other architectures as well. And you get it from nodered.org. I will supply at the end, I'll supply David with a list of useful information and sites about Node-RED that you can use. I'm sure David will be able to publish that somewhere. So the Raspberry Pi is a very popular option, and it works very well on a Pi 3 or 4. It makes it very good for experimenting, and on the Node-RED site, there's a custom installation script that makes it particularly easy to install Node-RED. So that makes a great platform. It's a great use of your Raspberry Pi. Those doing the little Raspberry Pi Jam that's coming up might like to have a play with it because it is very powerful. So how do we use Node-RED? Well, it's drag and drop, basically. You drag and drop code blocks called nodes onto a screen, and you connect the nodes with wires. It's a bit like drawing a schematic, really. Each node also has a configuration screen. So if you double click on the node, it will pop up a configuration screen where you control what it does. But there's no code involved in that. And then these JSON messages are how the information is passed between the various nodes. So there's two nodes that are particularly useful when you're playing around and experimenting with program. One is called the inject node, and it's well described because it allows you to manually or automatically inject a message into a flow. You can set what the message is, and you can set the timing, etc. So this is really useful when you're building your own flow, that you can use this inject node to inject a message in and make sure that your node does what you expect it to do. And the other thing that goes hand in hand with that is called a debug node. And this can be connected at any point in a flow and displays the message at that point. So this helps with problem solving. So if you've got a node that's not doing, or a flow that's not doing what you want it to do, you can connect these debug nodes at various points in your flow and see what's happened to the message as you go through. It's a bit like fault finding with the voltmeter, but except you're using this debug node to go through the program and see what's happening to the message as it flows through your program. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. This is the installation I'm going to be working on tonight. So in the bottom right here, we've got my FT897 radio, which is linked to a Raspberry Pi. So we've got cat cables linking it to the Raspberry Pi. And on the Raspberry Pi, I'm running the FL-Rig software. I expect you've heard of FL-Rig. It's part of the FL Digi range of digital software, but FL-Rig is a rig control package, which makes rig control possible over a network. And that Raspberry Pi is connected to my local network, and specifically to my main PC that I'm doing this talk on, where I'm running Windows 11, and I will run Node-RED on this PC as well. So now we get to the interesting bit, because we're going live and we're going to do it for real. So the first thing we want to do is to actually start up Node-RED. Now, I've already installed Node-RED on this computer, but it is a basic installation, so I haven't installed any of the special nodes I need, because I'll show you how to do that. So to start Node-RED, you can go down to the search button down here and just type in Node-RED, and it will bring up a command prompt and run the program. Or you could just bring up a command prompt to do it. So I'll just type Node-RED here. There we go. It's going to run it as a command. So with the command prompt on, it's now run Node-RED. So the Node-RED server is now running on my computer, and that's all you'll get. And if you look through the messages, you will see that it says now the server's now running at that address, which is this PC's address. So if I open a browser and go to the easiest way to get to your own computer, a server on your own computer, is to use localhost. And the port it's on, which is what they said, was port 1880. So it's :1880. So if I hit return, up will come Node-RED. Now it's been left with that on it. I'll take that off. I just need to move the screen right. So this is what Node-RED looks like when you first get it running. And we just maximize it so you get the most. So on the left-hand side here is all the nodes that you can use, all these blocks. And there's quite a few of them in the standard package. And you'll see that at the top are the two most useful for debugging, which is the inject node and the debug node. Now you'll notice as I hover over a node, you get a help message come up, which explains basically what that node does, which is quite useful. So if we just start off by bringing in a inject node and a debug node, and we can wire them together just like that. Now you notice they've got a little blue dot around them, and that's because nothing happens until we deploy them. And in the top right here is where we deploy them. So when we make changes in the browser here, it's not until we hit the deploy button that they get sent to the server and acted upon. So if I hit deploy now, I'll get a little message comes up that say it's successfully deployed. So what happens now? Well, if we double click on this inject node, we'll get the configuration screen. And here we can give this a name. So if we just call it test, and below here we can determine what messages it's going to send. Now, you remember I said that the messages start with MSG and then you can have different things underneath. Well, we've got two here. I'm going to get rid of one. We're just going to have one message, which is going to be called the payload, and it's going to be a timestamp. So if I click done, that's it. I still need to hit deploy. So in order to send a message manually from this inject mode, you have to press this little button at the end here. Just click this button. And if you go over here in this tab, this panel will show debug messages. So it will show anything that comes out of that debug message. So if I click on this button now, we should get a timestamp. There it is. So that big number is the way Linux time works. It's the number of milliseconds since I think the 1st of January 1970, which is why it's a big number. But we can change this. So if we go in here and we say we don't want it to be a timestamp, we want it to be a string. And then we can type our string. Whoops. So we'll put in hello, and we'll click done. We'll deploy it. And now when I press test, we'll get the message hello. What I can also do is add more things. So if I click this add button down here, another one comes up. So I could have that, we could call that one name, and we'll put Mike in there, and we'll add another one. Oops. And we'll call it call sign or call, and we'll put my call in there, and we'll deploy that. Now in the debug node, we want to change it so that it displays the complete message. So we should see everything then. So if I click this, you see the message has got a lot more complicated. And if I click on this little arrow to open it up, you'll see it's all neatly separated out. So you've got the message ID, so that's a unique ID for the message. You've got the payload, which I set at hello. We've got my name, which is set at Mike, my call, which is set at G4WNC. So you can see you can make up all sorts of messages and send them. Now this is not of any use at all as it stands, but it just illustrates how they work. So what we want to do really is to go and do something a lot more interesting. So we'll delete those and hit deploy again. Every time you do something, you need to remember to hit deploy, otherwise it doesn't change on the server. So what I will show you before we actually create our next one is this hamburger menu, as it's called up the top, the 3 horizontal lines, takes you to all sorts of useful places. Just got to move something a minute. And one of the most useful when you're starting is the Node-RED website, which is here. So this is really packed with useful information. So when you're first starting, the Get Started area is where to start. And that takes you through. So if I go there, so it shows you how to run it locally, specifically how to run it on a Raspberry Pi, and various other installations as well. So this is a really good place to go to get started. You've got the user guide, you've got some structured tutorials, and the cookbook is particularly useful because it's packed with flows that other people have written that you can use as samples, because you might find there's something that nearly does what you want that you can adapt. So that's really useful. So that's the Node-RED site. So what we're going to do is we're going to now we're going to pull together a rig control system for my rig here. Now I know that in order to do this, we need to add 2 nodes that are not currently in Node-RED. So we go down to Manage Palette and we go to the Install tab and you search for what you want. Now the FL rig system uses a message system that's not JSON. It uses a message system called XML RPC, which is a bit of a cumbersome system. So we need a node that converts from that to JSON. So if we just write in here XML RPC, there we go. We come up with all the various nodes that work to that. Now the first one is the one we want. So we just want to install that node. And here you get the option to look at information about the node or just install it. So I know it works, so we're just going to install it. And there we go. You get this note come up at the top of the screen that says all the clients that have all the nodes that have been installed. Now the other one we want is the dashboard that I mentioned. So the dashboard is what lets us have a graphic user interface. So if we just type in dashboard, so the Node-RED dashboard is the one we want. It's bang up to date. It's been updated a month ago. So we'll just install that one. And that will install a whole raft of nodes. There we go, a great list of nodes that we've added in there. So we can close that. And if we go over to the left-hand panel now, we'll see there's a new node. That's our XML RPC node that will talk to FLDigi. And if we go further down, we'll see there's the dashboard node, which has got all the things we need to make an interesting dashboard. So the first thing we'll do is we want to set the frequency. If we can't do anything else, we do want to set the frequency of the rig. So we'll get the XML RPC node, which is the one that's going to talk to FLDigi. And we need to add the client in. So we're going to call it FLDigi. And it's not on our local host machine. It's on this Raspberry Pi, and I just need to check what the IP address of the Raspberry Pi is. Oops. 194. So that address is 192.168.1/194, and the FLDigi client will tell us what node it's on, port it's on. It's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we add that. Now, when we talk to FLDigi, we need to tell it what to do. So what we want it to do this time is set the frequency. And in FLDigi is a list of all the commands you can use. And one of them is rig.set VFO. And we'll call that set VFO. So what this is, so if I click that, you see we've got the blue dot which says that we need to deploy it. So that's been deployed now. And so we should now be able to change the frequency of the VFO on the rig just with that one thing, but we need to send it a number so it knows what to change it to. So we can use the inject node here just to test it. So if we wire that up to there, go on the inject node, we only want one part of the message, and whoops, I didn't mean to do that. One part of the message, it's going to be the payload. And in here, you can determine what type of message it is. Well, we want a number. And the number we want to give it is, say, I don't know, FT8 on 20 meters. So we go, and it's got to be in hertz. It's 14,074,123. And because of a bug in FL rig, we need to add a decimal point and a 1 after that number, otherwise it doesn't like it. So if I click done on there and deploy, when I press this button, it should send the message to the rig and change the frequency, which it's just done. But of course, you can't see that. And we could check that that message is going out by connecting a debug node to there and deploying that. And then when I press that button, we'll see it come out over there. So we can see the number has been going out into that node. So that looks fine. So we can kill that debug node. So now we can put a frequency in that node and send it off. Now the problem is that's a bit cumbersome, isn't it, really, because we've got to do it in the program. What we'd really like to do is have some control via a web page. So this is where the dashboard comes in. So here, look, we've got a numeric node. So this adds a numeric input widget to the user interface. So that sounds ideal. So we'll bring that in. We'll get rid of the inject node. Now you notice sometimes these nodes have a little red triangle, and that means that it's not yet been configured. It means you need to do something. So we're going to connect that together, and then we double click on it so we can get to its configuration page. So in order to have a widget in the user interface, we need to have a new group. So you just click on that there, and we'll call this rig control. And we need to add a new tab as well. And we'll call that FT897. We've done that. So now we get, that's all looking good. Now we get to back to the screen. So we want a numeric range in here somewhere. So we need to set what the maximum and minimum value is that we want to send with this numeric thing. So I'm going to say the minimum is 100, and we've got to put that decimal point in at the moment till this bug is fixed. And we're going to say the maximum is going to be 440.123.123.1, and we'll have it change in 100 hertz steps. So that looks pretty good. And if this is a little trick, if we change that to message.payload, it means we can use up and down arrows to alter this number, but we can also edit the number directly. So we can deploy that. Now, so where's our user interface? Well, you need to open another web browser to see it. And you do the same. So it's localhost 1880, but you follow it with UI for user interface. And lo and behold, there we go. We just squeeze that down. Now, we've only called it numeric. We ought to call it something better than that. And I can use this to change the frequency. And I can also 1407 4000. And now my rig is changing as I alter this. So I'm now able to alter my rig's frequency from here. So what we could do is change that from being numeric as the label and say set frequency. Done that, hit deploy, go to our, see there it's changed it to set frequency. So now we're able to change the frequency of the rig, but what we're actually seeing here is that number is what we've sent to the rig. It's not necessarily what the rig is tuned to. So to be safe, we ought to have another node that reads the frequency from the transceiver so that we know that it's been changed, because the link could have been broken, anything could have happened. So if we have another one of these and we double click on it, it's already set to the right client because we previously used that and it assumes that's what you want. So now the method or the command we're going to send to FLRig is get, is rig.get VFO. Fairly obvious really. And we'll call it get VFO, so it's simple. And we can deploy that. So that's okay, but we now need some way of displaying the result, because there's a number going to come out of this, which is going to be the rig frequency. So we need another dashboard piece. So we need a text box, that one, which we can wire up. And we'll call that rig frequency. And we'll send that. So now if we look at our little GUI, we've got another one there that says the rig frequency. But at the moment it's blank because something needs to kick it off. We've not started it with any message going in to get it going. So this is where we can use an inject node. So we bring that over here and connect it through. Now it doesn't actually matter what we send this because it ignores the message, but it just needs a message to make it happen. So we'll do that. But what we'll do is use this repeat function down here so that it sends a message every second. So what that means is that every second it will ask the rig for the frequency. So now we've got a readout up there. And if I start moving the frequency here, you'll see it catches up shortly afterwards. So now we can see that we can set the rig's frequency and we can see that the rig has actually changed frequency. So we're getting somewhere, aren't we? We can now remotely control our rig in terms of frequency. And we haven't actually done very much in the way of programming. We've only used 5 of these blocks. But there's lots of other things that we could do. So how about if we got the signal strength as well? So we can get that from the rig. So we get another one of these nodes that connects to FL rig. Double click on it again, and the method we're going to use here is rig get dbm. Now all these commands are listed in FLDigi, in the help file in FLDigi. So so we'll call this S meter. So the little triangle's gone away, so we've configured it okay, so we can deploy that. We've got the same problem in that something's got to kick it off. So this node, which is called timestamp for now, I think what we'll do is we'll change just the name of it and call it pulse. Because that's what it's going to be doing. It's generating a pulse every second. So if we wire that to here, then it's going to get the S meter reading every second. Now, we want to display the reading from the S meter somewhere on the user interface. So what could we use to do that? So if we look through the dashboard, there's all sorts of things. We've got a gauge there. So we could have a gauge, which is a bit like a meter, isn't it? So we could put a gauge in there, wire that up, whoops. Wire that to there. Now, so we can give this a name with the label, just call it signal. Now we have to state what the minimum and maximum range of the gauge is. So 0 to 10 won't do because we're getting signal levels in dB. So really the minimum probably minus 100 and the maximum, I don't know, minus 20 perhaps. And so we'll say done and we'll deploy that. So if we now look at our user interface again, all of a sudden we've got an S meter. So now we can move around, and no doubt the S meter will change at some point. So if I change that to 07, yeah, there we go. So the S meter's updating every second now. So that's getting quite good. Now what you could say, hang on, this is a bit of a mess because we've got the rig frequency up there and we've got the set frequency down below. Can we not alter that? How do we move it around? Well, it's very easy. You go over here to dashboard and you'll see all your modules listed in order. So what we can do is just move that one up so it's above, hit deploy. When we go back over here, there we are, that's changed the order of them. So, but we can do more with what we're getting from the S meter. How about if we have a chart that plots the changes in signal strength? So we could get a chart from over here and drag it over. And we don't need another node to get the information. We can just wire that same output to there and use the configuration to say what the max and minimum is. So the minimum is going to be minus 100 again. For the sake of it, we'll say the maximum is 0. Then we can deploy that. And what that should be doing now is showing us a graph of the S meter, which it is. And it will just continue to plot the changes in signal strength. So if I go, see the signal's just changed, and you can see that the S meter chart has changed. So that's quite interesting. But what about if we want to change the mode of the rig? Well, same sort of thing again, really, and we can just keep building up like this until we have more and more. So we get one of those nodes that's going to talk to the rig, and this one we want to set the mode. So it's rig set underscore mode. We'll call it set mode. So this is going to set the mode, and we need some sort of input as to how we set the mode. And what would be quite nice for that is a drop-down menu. So, because there's only certain modes we can have. There's no point in leaving it for people to just type anything in. So if we do a drop-down, so we'll say USB, and the command for USB is actually just USB. We could add another one, which is LSB. We'll have another one, which is digital. There we go. And we can, that's done. So all we need to do is put that information into there, so that now on the, let's have a look at the UI, user interface, and see what that now looks like. So down the bottom here, it says select option, and you can see we've got USB, LSB, and digital there for us to select. Now, I can see here that that's changing the mode on the rig quite successfully. So we need another one now, because we need to get the mode and display it. So we just have another one of the same nodes, the XML RPC node, and we're going to wire that to a simple text block, one of those, join those together. So the method we want to use is rig get mode, and we'll call it get mode. So there we go, and the text one, that's okay, and this needs, the label needs to be mode. That's all we need there. We can deploy that. Now again, we really need to use that pulse to get the mode. So this is a bit messy, but I'm going to wire it straight down to there and deploy it. So we're using that 1 second pulse. In fact, what we ought to do is move that up there. Then we haven't got such a nasty crossover, and the diagram gets a bit simpler. So if we deploy that and we look at the user interface, so we choose our mode and it changes down there. Choose our mode there, digital, and it changes down there. So how are we doing for time, by the way, David? Are we all right?
We're absolutely fine. Yes, thanks, Mike.
Okay. So you can see we're actually starting to get quite a sophisticated rig control system here. So this is our panel, and we haven't written any code yet at all. And we're able to change the frequency of the rig, read the S meter, plot the results of the signal strength, choose the mode. It would also be very easy up here to, if you wanted to do like a band memory, so you could have another drop down here, where we could say 14074000.1 and call that 20 meters. You could do a second one, which is 7074000.1, 40 meters, and so on. Label, band select, and ink. Now, we can set that in. We don't need to do another node because we can feed it into the set VFO. So we can hit deploy. And if we now look at our thing, which is getting a bit busy, but if we look down the bottom here, we've got band select. And we can choose 40 meters. And it didn't work. And we can choose. I knew something wasn't going to work. So we've been doing quite well so far.
It's all right. It shows it's live, Mike.
Yeah. Play solid select option. Teach. Oh, should that be payload?
I think you mentioned earlier that, because that was one of my questions I was going to ask you about the command set. I used to call it the instruction set. I mean, so you said that's in the help file, so you can find out what the commands are. Is that right? Just for beginners in programming?
Yes. For each of these nodes, if you go up here, there's the help file, which tells you about the node with some examples of how to use it. So you do that on any node, and it will tell you. The ones that are built in, it tells you a lot more than ones that other people have created.
Yeah. So basically, you can find out what syntax you need to use, and what it does and how to use it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And there's so much help on the web about this. There's lots of YouTube tutorials, etc., which will show you how to use all these different boxes.
Sorry to interject, but I was just partly doing it to fill time while you looked at it. But also I thought people might be wondering at home, how am I going to remember all these different commands and things to start with? So I thought might be just worth mentioning at this point. But I'll hand it back to you anyway.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, it's a good point, actually. What I'm just going to demonstrate as well is having built this, although I'm controlling this rig from my main computer where I'm running Node-RED, I can actually do it from anywhere on the local network. Because, hang on, let me just kick it off here. I'm just going to show you it working on my phone. I just need to put my correct IP address in. So can they see me at the moment?
Yeah, we'll switch to you full screen. There we are. And I think people can see it. Wow, that was very quick. So you've just typed, you've typed in another address on your network. Is that the address of where this program is?
My computer.
Right,
so
okay.
All I did was type in the IP address of this computer that's running Node-RED, followed by UI, the port and UI. And that control interface is now on my phone, and we can control it from two places at once, because if I show that there, I can go in and start changing frequency, and you'll see it's changing there. I'm changing that frequency on my phone at the moment.
Okay.
So it's tremendously powerful, and I mean, I won't waste any more time on this diagram at the moment, because I've probably done the gist of what I wanted to do. I've obviously done a silly mistake at the bottom here, which won't come to me until I stop talking. So I think the point of this presentation is to show you that you can do something quite sophisticated without actually writing any code. Now, accepted that you need to know what to put in the configuration boxes, but it's not necessarily that complicated to do. I've done it all very quickly here. Now, this flow that you see here, this program, is called a flow. I did one earlier, as they say, and I've already uploaded it to the site where you can get it. So if you go to the little box at the top of your Node-RED up here and go to the Node-RED website and flows, you can search on there for flows. There's loads of flows that other people have put up there. and you'll see mine's listed here. I think there's about 4,500 flows on here.
Wow.
So there's loads of them. So there's mine. So if you click on that, there it is. So that's the node that I've just configured that I'm using for this talk. And if you wanted to import that yourself, all you do is you click copy, and that copies it onto the clipboard. You go back to Node-RED. Hang on, I've got my window covering that. You go back to Node-RED and you go to import. And where this window is here, click paste, and that's pasted all the information in. So if I click import now, we'll get a new flow turn up, and that's that one I've just introduced. So you've now got, or we've now added that flow that I wrote earlier. So any of you want to play with this, because bearing in mind that this uses FL-RIG, and FL-RIG will control most transceivers. So you could, using this little flow, you could control your own transceiver if you run FL-RIG on one of your computers and point it.
And while I mention that again, Mike, just because people watching this will have different levels of knowledge and experience with doing this, the method that you've used to connect this computer to the rig in this case was a CAT control, wasn't it? And is that usually USB or serial or what?
It's serial over USB, but it's your standard. Anyone who's got computer control on their rig, normally these days it's either a USB lead between the rig and your computer, or it's a USB going to separate leads that plug into the back of your transceiver. Yeah. If it's an older one like this FT897, it's USB lead at one end, and at the other end there's a couple of plugs that plug in the back of the transceiver. Right. But if you've got something newer like a 7300 or whatever, you'll find you've got a USB socket on the back of the rig. Okay, so that's all you need. And then to run FL-RIG, which again is a free program, on another computer that can get at your rig.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
So I'm going to delete the one that I've just imported, go back to this one. So I think probably it's better that I finish at this point, because I've said an awful lot. There's a lot of information in here. And the main reason for the talk was to demonstrate that you can actually write quite a sophisticated control program without using any code as such.
Well, I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people to give that a go, especially maybe if they can start by just taking your example there that you've uploaded already as part of the library of examples, and you can then tinker with it rather than start with a clean sheet, which is always quite difficult to do.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway.
Well, this is a good opportunity then to remind you at home now. This is a good time to ask questions. We've already got one question from Chris, and I'll cover that in a moment. But if you've got any questions or queries or comments, or maybe you've given this a go yourself before, then this is the time to enter it either on BATC or Facebook, and we'll be sure to relay them to Mike. So let you have a chance. You've had a drink, I think, there, Mike. So
I just had a quick swig, yeah.
I don't blame you. That's really good. So the first questions that we've had actually was from Chris G4WNC, and he asks, will it work with any model of Raspberry Pis, or is it just, say, the more recent ones like 3s and 4s?
It definitely works with the 3 and 4. I think it will probably work with a 1 and 2 as well, but I haven't tried it.
And just to clarify that a little bit further for my benefit and maybe others, so at the moment you've been doing that tonight on a PC, a conventional PC, and you said earlier it would work on Linux and Mac as well. But would you run that same program, the same sort of thing that you've been doing, you could do that on a Raspberry Pi?
Yes, yeah. In fact, I started doing it on a Raspberry Pi and then ended up moving it to the PC. So it works perfectly well. You can run it on any computer connected to your network, and as long as you point at the right place where the FL-RIG is running, it will work fine.
Okay. Well,
it's very lightweight as a piece of software. It's very lightweight.
Yeah, and actually as a PS, and I think I was thinking similarly, but Ray G3XLG has said, I'm not quite clear where the Pi came into it. I thought Mike said he was using a computer, not the Pi. And that's kind of, I suppose, where my mind was as well, just making sure that I understood correctly that it wasn't just implementing the program on a Pi after you've done it, but you could develop the program on a Pi as well.
Yes, you can. You can. I just for convenience, I ran it on the PC, but I would normally run it on the Pi. It runs exactly the same on the Pi. It looks the same on the Pi. So, yeah, absolutely fine.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Lots of other comments. I'm rushing to try and get them through, which is great. Thank you very much for entering all these. Jim G through YLA asks and says, very interesting, Mike. How fast can you take samples? I guess that's for graphical, the graphs and things.
The refresh rate effectively. Well, the inject node, I haven't tried more than once a second, actually. The inject node, I think the fastest you can do it, let's have a look at this pulse thing. It's second. It gives you seconds, minutes, and hours as the option. So as it stands, it's every second using the inject node to trigger it. I haven't tried going any faster. It should be possible to. All you've got to bear in mind is the speed it takes to get the messages through the system, which should be pretty fast, to be honest. And of course, all the time you're pulsing, you're asking the rig to do something. So you might run into some bottlenecks if you go too fast.
Yes, I guess if you're trying to do too many things, or lots of things, to and fro as well, and checking, inputting as well as outputting. Maybe try it. So although you said it starts with seconds, minutes and hours, I guess you might be able to put 0.1 second, for example, to 10.
I haven't tried that. Go on then, let's put it in and see what happens.
You're going to do it now live? Oh, that's good. Yeah, so let's do that. We'll show you Mike's screen again.
All right.
Here we go. This is just for you, Jim. And I guess it also might be up to the might be where the speed of your computer might come into it as well, Mike.
So I've done that and I'm going to deploy it. So successfully deployed, so nothing's complained as yet. So let's go to changing the frequency. Well, it seems to be working. I can't actually tell, of course, how fast it's really doing it, but it accepted the input. So I've not tried that before, and it did accept, as you can see down there.
So it isn't just limited to integers, I guess, or whole numbers rather.
No, it's probably not.
I've a very rudimental knowledge of programming, but that was a bit of a jargon. So okay, so that's worth trying, and I why not? And it's the whole point about this is that you can experiment, and many people watching this, I guess I'm a hardware engineer myself with more of a hardware. My professional background and training was all mainly with electronics and hardware and op amps and logic gates and things rather than software. So this is interesting territory. But I guess the nice thing with this is the very, very worst that could happen is that the program crashes and you have to restart the program. And you can't do any real damage, can you, trying this? Rick,
it's great for hardware people to play with some software because you can do it without having to get terribly involved in programming languages.
Yes, and it is really good. Lots of people saying thank you. I mean, Paul M1AFQ has just said, love this. Thanks, Mike. Rick M7GMT says, can you use regular Node.js modules from brackets from NPM, or do packages need to be specifically for Node-RED?
They're specifically for Node-RED, really, because it's all about all the links between all these modules are all done in JSON. So it's all about whatever the function is, the output has to be a JSON message moving on. So you could probably adapt other nodes if you've got the function you want, because it is just written in Node.js. So you could adapt them, but you'd have to make them fit. And there's a lot of information on the Node-RED site about how to create your own nodes, and that would probably give you the information you need to know how to adapt an existing Node.js function to work in Node-RED.
Okay, thank you. Bob G6PWS has said, is this the same as Arduino sketches?
No. No, Arduino sketches are written in C, basically. So that's a programming language that you're actually writing C code in Arduino. Whereas this, as you can see from this particular one, we haven't written any code at all. We've used code that other people have created and turned into nodes and just dragged them into place to carry out the function that we want.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And I was certainly, by the way, will make Jeff aware of this. Jeff is going to be running this informal workshop for us on the Raspberry Pi, and I think this could well be a very good application. And I'll make sure that if he isn't watching this live now tonight, I'll make sure that we, just for everybody's benefit actually at home, I'm sure most of you know now, but if you're not watching this, or if you haven't managed to watch this live, then we do take a studio recording and we upload this to YouTube, which you'll be able to watch within the next 48 hours. So that's just something. And actually thinking about this has almost been a mini course, Mike, so it might be something that people want to watch back, actually.
Well, that's what I thought. I was hoping you were recording it, because the bulk of the first part of the presentation is just a bit of waffle about where it came from, but the meat of it is in the demonstration, really, as how to use it.
Yeah, and a nice thing with the recording, you stop and start it and everything else. So watch out for that if you want to in the next few days.
But I'm quite happy for people to contact me if they're stuck or want some advice on it. That's no problem.
Yes, and early on you mentioned that I'd be able to put a link on things to you and your website. So I'll certainly do that as well on the newsletter as a follow up to this. And when we publish the link to the recording as well, we can include it there. Ray J3XLG, who asked the question about is this running on or could this run on a Pi or a PC as well as a PC? Ray has said, I can see how this could put everything on one GUI, but how will it enable me to improve my contest scores or work Beauvais Island? Well,
I tell you what, talking of contests, there is a very interesting flow that's available for download, which you'll find by another group. It's on the Groups.io site. There is a Node-RED for amateur radio group specifically, and that's going to be in the list of contacts that I send you. And in there is specifically a contest flow that works with N1MM logger. And if you're a multi-op contest organizer, it keeps scores of all the contest operators as to how many points they're scoring, and you can play everyone off against each other. And it produces a central panel where you can see all the scores, how the different bands are operating, how well they're scoring. So
I think this sounds dangerously tempting for our very active contest group. I'm sure there'll be some now thinking about that. And of course, some people maybe think, well, why would I put it on a Raspberry Pi when I've got a PC? But of course, it does enable you to, to use a relatively low-cost computer, £50 or so. And rather than tying up your PC for other things, on other things. So if you have applications,
for the contest scoring thing, it's ideal because I think most contest groups have a network running these days, have a LAN running. So you could just have the Raspberry Pi sat on that LAN doing all the scoring because it would feed from everything else. So you wouldn't tie up one of your computers. You wouldn't be putting together a particularly noisy, great big computer. You could put a Raspberry Pi in there and screen it all up as a low power, quiet little box that will do all the work in the background.
Indeed. Well, so said, I'll make sure that Jeff sees all this as well. And there's lots of other applications as well, I'm sure. James M0ZAH says, I suppose not a bad idea to set a TOT on the radio in case it locks in TX, a TOT timeout timer?
Yeah. You could do that in various modes. You could put a you could probably do something. If you're running this remote, if the Raspberry Pi is in the same place as the rig, which it would have to be, and you're running Node-RED on that Raspberry Pi, it will be quite easy to put a little control point in this program that if it's on transmit for more than a certain amount of time, that it knocks the rig off. That wouldn't be too difficult at all.
Okay, thanks. I know James is into programming, and maybe others, as you said, this is an ideal opportunity to get into it and gently, and maybe you'll like it as well. You know, programming.
It's the real thing that made a big difference for me was having the graphic user interface available, because for most people who fiddle about with programming and do a bit of Arduino stuff, the thing that's hardest is getting a pretty interface. So you can use it on your phone or your computer or whatever. The dashboard in Node-RED makes that an absolute piece of cake, as you've seen. I haven't had to do anything fancy to get that dashboard. I just drop the modules on there, and then I can, in a list, move them up and down and have the order that I want. So that's really a big step forward.
Now, I know you're here, obviously, to talk about this application in amateur radio. Are there other applications that you think that hams might be able to do, both for amateur radio and for completely different things around the home?
It's used a hell of a lot for home automation setups. It's absolutely ideal for running home automation setups. And there's loads of flows for home automation already uploaded on the sites that you can download and use as a starter. So, yeah, I mean, amateur radio is a minority area for application of Node-RED. There are loads of other applications that it gets used for. It gets used for statistical monitoring. You can use it for gathering weather information. It will take reports from Twitter. It will respond to emails. It will respond to all sorts. It's huge what it can do.
And I guess you get some idea of this by looking at the repository of the programs that other people have written.
Flows that are available. Yeah. And you can. There's a world map you can have as well, and you can plot APRS reports on the map and have it shown in the GUI, and so much you can do with it. I just scraped the surface here because I just wanted to show how you could do something interesting without any code, with, I don't know, 8 or 10 nodes. That's all.
Yes, I mean, if you can, say, put these links and things to me on an email, I will honestly make sure that they go next to the where we put the link for the recording as well. I've just got a question there from Bob, and I want to ask that. I'm not quite sure. We might need a bit more information, Bob, because one of the things is the messages that come through. There's a bit of a delay between the video streaming and things in it. So, but anyway, I'll read it to Mike as you've written it. Bob has said, "Can Mike just explain where and what flow he added?" I'm not sure. Do you know which one he means, maybe, or not? I'm not sure.
Oh, well, when I added the flow for my for this example,
I don't know, Bob. If I could ask you just to elaborate a little bit of which flow that Mike added, and I'll come back to it, and Mike will come back to it because we've got another question, a couple of questions as well. I think that's probably best. So, Bob, if you could just elaborate which flow you were talking about. As I said, we're a little bit behind, and we've obviously been talking about a few other things in the time that it's taken for you to see it at home. Meantime, I'll go to Jim G4WNC, who said, "Sorry, we doubled." I love it. Yes, it is true. We doubled. You said it as I pressed send. Oh, I see. Interface to weather stations. That was his other question on here. He was asking if you could interface to weather stations, and I think that's when I probably asked what else you could do with it and what else you could connect. So
you can. There is a node you can get for world weather. So if we go to the Node-RED, not the Node-RED website. If you go up here to Manage Palette and look for Install and put in Weather. So you've got a variety, Open Weather Map, Weather Flow, a variety of nodes that can be added that will retrieve weather information from various sites around the internet. And there's another 15 more over and above that. So there's loads of them.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I can't think why Jim would want to know about that, but I'm sure that I'm sure you'll be playing with that, Jim. That's right. Got about Bob has come back now, and he said when Mike started, he added flows to his palette. So I guess it's about that.
Right. Question. Okay. Yep. So what I added actually was nodes, not flows. So I knew that in order to run this program, I needed to be able to talk to FL Rig, An FL rig only talks in XML RPC. That's the messaging system it uses. So we needed a node to be able to talk to it. So what I did, I went up to the burger menu at the top, manage palette, and then in the install box, I typed in XML RPC, and that gave me a list of nodes that can talk XML RPC. And I just picked the first one and installed that. So that was the first one. The second one I got was the dashboard, because the dashboard isn't always installed when you first install Node-RED. So again, I went to Manage Palette, Install, and then I just typed in dashboard. There are several here, but it's the one that's plain Node-RED dashboard, and you can tell it's the up-to-date one because it was updated a month ago. And I installed that, and that gave us all the GUI widgets and that, so that we could build our user interface.
Fantastic. Good. I'm intrigued with it as well, and I often think like this, but and I think now programming's not really for me, but I think this is one I really could give it a go.
It's yeah. I mean, I was very green on this a week ago.
Really?
And one of the reasons I said I'd give this talk is because I wanted to learn Node-RED.
So you wanted almost a reason to learn it and an excuse to have a go.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that unless I had a reason to do it, I wouldn't put the time in to get to grips with it. So the beginning of last week, I had used it in the past, but probably 2 or 3 years ago, and hadn't really done much with it. So at the beginning of last week, I started, every day I was playing around with it, fiddling around, trying to get things to work and working my way through it. And that's how I got to this stage, was trying to find a way to come up with a simple demonstration which would show the power of it. So, yeah, it's not that difficult to learn.
No, and of course, like a lot of these really good bits of software, this is completely free. You said IBM developed it,
Yep.
but it's open source and it's free on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and of course Raspberry Pi as well. So,
yeah, and there's loads of flows you can download that might do similar things to what you want that you can then mess about with, or if nothing else, you can look at them and see how they work, give you ideas as to how to do something you want to do.
I just asked one other question. Thinking about it, someone asked about what model of Raspberry Pi did you need. Computer-wise, do you have a very powerful computer? Because some of us use older PCs in our shacks.
No, that's fine. Absolutely
really
fine. It's extremely lightweight. Because when you think about it, it's not actually doing very much. It's generating the GUI, which is nothing, to be honest, and all it's doing is passing messages around. So it's not doing any clever computational stuff at all. It's really quite simple stuff. And if you look at the code that makes up one of the nodes, there isn't much code in there. So for the majority of them, so it's it's a very lightweight program. So you don't need to worry about the power of your PC.
Okay, thank you. Colin G000R says, Mike, was the Flex control panel you showed early on 4 dashboards beside each other?
Yeah, you can. The dashboard that I showed was just one that I worked on, was just one panel, and you can have several of these. You can have them arranged in tabs, so you can have layers of interfaces one behind the other. So, yeah, you can build up quite complicated things. And anyone who's got a Flex 6000 series, if you go to the Ham Radio Node-RED group on Groups.io, you'll find there's loads of flows to download that pick up all the messages and control systems from Flex radios. There's been a huge amount of work done on that particular rig because it's very popular in the States, and there's a whole group of people who've spent a lot of time on Node-RED building things up. So Flex 6000, get on there and get some of those flows down. You'll find it's really fascinating.
Absolutely wonderful. Mike, I think we've gone through the questions and comments that people have had, except lots of people saying thank you, and that goes, of course, from all of us watching tonight. It really has been truly inspirational just to watch you do it live on the screen, because most of us could do what you've done on there on the screen, I think. And we just a little bit of the background knowledge to get us started, which you've given us tonight. So once again,
Good.
Lovely to see you again, Mike G4WNC.
Yeah, Jim.
Thank you ever so much indeed.
My pleasure. Yeah,
Thanks,
cheers.
Mike. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. There we are. A fascinating evening. I mean, that really does make me feel now, if it wasn't so late and I hadn't had tea, because he mentioned burger menus as well, you know, and that just makes me feel even more hungry because we haven't had anything to eat since about 12:30. But it does look really like something that you could really get your teeth into. And then with our Raspberry Pi workshop that we're doing next week as well at CNS, you know, it could be a project that people want to get started with. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Just to remind you again what's happening at the club this coming week. So Saturday, as I said before, it's the 10 o'clock in the morning. So on 7.123 megahertz is our monthly Koblenz Sked, when I hope you'll join us on that. And don't forget, if you want to make sure that our net controller listens for 145.250 local VHF net, to let Malcolm know. On Sunday at 7 o'clock p.m, it's the GB2RS News on GB3MB repeater. Monday night net is also on GB3MB at 7:30, and at 8:30 the 80 meter CW net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, the 15th of February, we won't be here online, we'll be there in person at the CNS school between 7 and 9:30, our longer hours, with a social for those who'd like that, plus those who've shown an interest in the Raspberry Pi workshop. Jeff J7PLF will be running the first of our workshops, which is just an overview of what we'll be covering, and wants to know what you would like to get from the course and get an idea of what people know already. And of course we'll set the level at the beginners if that's what everybody would like. So we look forward to seeing many of you at the school next week. And don't forget that apart from that, to let us know your news and views and everything for the next NARC Live. And if you'd like to send one of these cards as well, send us the name and address if you'd like to send it to, and we'll add your name to ours and send it to them. But that's it for this NARC Live. So from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7URP, take care of yourselves. Look after each other. Bye-bye.